So let me start by thanking everyone for taking the time out to attend this masterclass. I've been kind of leaving messages on the WhatsApp group to say that this is part 2 of the Perfect Parenting Masterclass. And I'll explain what the difference is between part 2 and part 1. This session is going to be primarily concentrating on connection. In other words, how you connect with your children so that you can help them transform themselves. So let me say a little bit about connection, and then we'll go into it in a lot more detail. Connection is something which in the literature is also called attachment. So this is the relationship or the bond that you have with your child, and the bond continues for whole of your life. So even if your child is 50 years old, you're still bonded with them in particular ways. And this research has been done over the last 50 years. What the research actually says is that connection is so important to child development that it's as good as breathing to a human being. If you stop breathing, you can't live. In the same way, if you stop connecting with your child, the child actually finds it difficult to function very well. In other words, it does affect them in a significant way. The key thing about connection is that it's good and healthy for child to have a good connection with the parent, and it's also good for their well-being. In other words, it actually helps them grow. So that's basically the overview of connection, but there are lots of uses of connection. Now, before I go into it, let me say a little bit about myself so you know who it is that you're talking to. And I'll also say a little bit about this particular masterclass, so it gives you a flavor of what you're going to hear today. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Nalini Murjaria. I'm a psychologist by profession, working as a parenting coach in the UK. So basically, I'm based in London. And what I want to say is this is not a webinar. And the reason why it's not a webinar is that when you finish, what you will go away with is you will go away with 7 insights. These are important insights. The first thing is how you use connection with your child in order to help them become a responsible person. In other words, you help them translate their behavior into responsible behavior. And we'll go into detail of how you do this. The next thing is that if your child has developed habits, so a simple example of a habit would be screen time. Another example of a habit would be, let's say a child is lying or a child doesn't like doing homework. Then you can use your connection to help them, again, change their habit to a good habit. So that's the second use of connection. The third use of connection basically is that if your child has not developed responsibility in line with their age. So for example, a 5-year-old has got different set of responsibilities to, let's say, a 14-year-old. Then you can use connection to actually help them develop those habits, become a responsible person. Then there is the issue about maturity, that connection is something that you need to use in order to help your child mature. Maturity is about decision making, that when you make decisions, some of your decisions can be mature, others can be immature. Maturity is nothing to do with age. It's actually to do with how you process information in your head and how you actually make decisions. Another area of connection, where connection comes in very, very important, is if you want to develop your child to have emotional intelligence. In other words, how they function in the school setting and how they function in the world generally or in the job, then they need emotional intelligence in order to get the best out of the situation. So again, connection is a very, very important element in being able to be emotionally intelligent. And the last thing is, if your child has got anxiety, unfortunately, 7% of people in this world have got anxiety disorders. And anxiety disorder is so serious that it can actually disrupt your daily functioning. And again, I'll go into a lot more detail on that today. So it gives you a flavor. So that's roughly what I'm planning to cover today. So if I were to tell you that connection is a very, very specific thing that has been studied for over last 50 years. And if I were to tell you that connection is something that you actually see, this is the research summary of 50 years of research. Basically, what the research is saying is that when you are well connected with your child, so in other words, here is the parent and here is the child, they're standing on this tower of connection. Can you see this tower? And when you are standing together, basically, you are standing on the tower, you are side by side, hand in hand, face to face. So in other words, you can see your child, the child feels secure, loved, and they can feel your affection. Whatever affection you are giving them, they can actually feel. And the other thing is that the child actually feels their back is covered. So, they feel secure, they feel safe, they feel you are responsive to them, they feel they are tuned into you, they feel your love, and they also feel the mirroring. In other words, if they talk to you, they know that you will actually respond very well. And this is the place from which the child actually feels they can explore the world and they can grow and develop. This is an important message about connection. That when connection is working well, so in other words, when you are on this tower of connection, there are a number of things that are actually happening. This is the moment, so if you think about that moment, when you're on that tower of connection, these are the kind of things that are going on. So the first thing that's happening is that you are filling the child's cup. What this means in practice is that for a child to grow and develop, they need to feel secure. They need to feel that you are behind them. They need to feel that they are with you or you are with them. And if they don't feel that, then the cup is empty. Am I making sense? That's a term that comes from Zen philosophy, that, when your cup is empty, you don't feel confident. But when you are on that platform, tower of connection, your cup is actually full. And you feel like you want to explore the world, you want to enjoy the world, things like that. Another thing that happens is that when you are on the top of that tower of connection, if there is any challenging behavior, so I'll give you a simple example of challenging behavior. If your child is snatching somebody else's toys, so let's say they went to a party and everybody's playing with toys and they carry on snatching, or if they are running around in a restaurant or something, or if they are back talking to you. So if they're doing that kind of challenging behavior, you can use the connection in order to help them transform it to responsible behavior. So it's when you are on that platform that is what matters. And I'm going to talk about how the platform actually breaks down and what is it that you actually do that will break the platform down, or under what circumstances does the platform break down, and then the child, instead of being there, cup being full, the cup is empty. The challenging behavior starts coming back. If they're a spoiled child, you will see their behavior of a spoiled child coming. They'll expect you to do things for them which they can do themselves. In other words, they will sit on the couch and ask for a glass of water when they actually can go and get the glass of water themselves. Another area is that children, by definition, are not born with maturity. You have to actually help them become mature. So when they are on that tower of connection, they feel secure to actually explore themselves in order to become mature. It's very important. So, being on that tower is very, very critical. If a child has got what I call low emotional intelligence, emotional intelligence is to do with how you engage with other people, right? How you work with them, how you actually get results, how you set goals. So you are basically using your brain to make some decisions, but at the same time, you're using your heart to make decisions. So emotional intelligence has got to do with that. And I'll go into it in a lot more detail. So on that tower, these are the kind of things that are happening. And if a child has got anxiety, then the best way to help the child is really to help them work that anxiety through. And I'll talk a lot more about what anxiety really is. I mean, if I say just one or two words about it, basically anxiety is to do with how active your brain is. In other words, so if I give you a simple example, let's say you see an accident on a video and you start imagining, oh my God, if I'm traveling in a car, I might have an accident. Can you see? Now your brain has got activated. And then you start thinking, oh God, if I have an accident, then I'll become disabled. This will happen. Now you haven't become disabled yet, but your brain is already beginning to think like that. So an anxious child is actually like that. They're overthinking things. And when they're overthinking things, then what happens is they start getting worried. And parents, when they're on that what I call tower of connection, that's when they can help them recover from it. It's very important. And there are some anxieties that emerge as a result of just growing up. Like, for example, a small child will be scared of darkness and so on. But an older child will also become scared of things that they're thinking of. So they might think, oh, if I go to school, I'll get bullied. And that kind of thinking can actually stop them in their tracks. They don't want to go to school anymore. So these are the kind of things that you can use connection for. That when you're on that tower of connection, basically there are things that your child can do which it can't do if the tower of connection is not working well. It's very, very critical that that is the message you take away from this, that the tower of connection is really, really important. So a lot of people are saying yes, 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 yes. Okay, so that is fine. So let's just go back to me sharing the screen, and then I can make a few other points. So basically, I mean, before I actually go into connection, let me just talk about how this session is actually linked to the session I've done before. Now, if you attended my session number 1, which I did about 2 weeks ago, then you would have seen this particular parenting journey map. On this map, I actually talk about the journey that you will travel on along with your child. And what happens on this journey is you will hit a lot of problems. So, for example, one of the problems you will hit is that you are not communicating well with your child, and the child is upset, you are upset. Or alternatively, your child has got a lot of challenging behavior and you don't know how to deal with it. So, for example, they're talking back to you, they've got habits which are difficult to deal with. So that is here. And then you want your child to become independent. That is one of the things that all parents tell me. They want their child not just to be independent, they want their child to be successful, they want their child to be resilient, they want their child, they expect a lot from their child. But the key thing is, if you do not help your child to get those things, then you will find the child is lacking. In other words, there are gaps in their life. And sometimes some children grow up with so many gaps in their life that as adults, they actually experience a lot of problems. Then there is the issue about family values. A lot of children put themselves at risk if they're not using family values to make decisions about life. So a simple example of this is, if a child goes to a party, let's say teenage type of party, and drinking is going on and all other sorts of things are going on, your child will use family values to decide this is healthy for me to do or not healthy for them to do, because there is peer pressure on them to do things which they will regret later on. So a simple example of this would be somebody wants to get close to them and they say, oh, let's just go upstairs. And if they don't have good family values, chances are they will actually give in to that peer pressure and later on regret why they went upstairs with this person. So I'm just giving you examples. And then we're talking about educational performance. Nowadays, if you are not good at education, then you're not good at being able to get those A grades, then again, you can get left behind. And when we talk about left behind, we're talking about loads of things. Not only will you get behind, you yourself feel bad as a child. And then as you get older, you will feel, oh, I'm not competing very well. And then you might get a job which is lower paid, your salary is probably low, and so on and so forth. Now, there is also another area which is important for children. This is to do with latent talent, that every child has got a talent. The question really is, are you able to get them to, in a sense, realize that talent, release that talent? If you are able to do that, then you will be able to help your child a lot. And the last thing is that if you want your child to be the top 1 or top 5% of this world, then they need to be good. They need to be a leader in their own right, in their own field. So it could be anything. If they are a dancer, they've got to be a good dancer. If they are a technician, they've got to be a very good technician. If they're a doctor, they need to be a very good doctor, because majority of people are average and they don't know how to go from average to excellent. So it's an important thing that this is the journey that you're traveling with your child. And the question really is, the problems that emerge on each part of the journey, if you are able to help the child with it, then the child will get the best that they can ever get in their world, or in this world, in their own life. So as parents, what we want to do is we want to help our children along this journey. And that is what I talked about when I did session 1. Now, if you haven't attended session 1, then what I would say to you is that I've put this video on YouTube. So I'll put a link here that if you want to, you can actually go to YouTube. I'll just share it in the chat. Go to YouTube and watch it, because you'll get a flavor of that journey and how you can help your child along that journey. And I talk about like 8 different skills that you might need in order to help your child on that journey. Okay, so that actually covers what I've talked about so far. But if there are questions, I don't mind answering the questions, because, people might look at it and they say, well, what does this mean? Or how does this work in practice? Because at the end of the day, parenting is a very, very practical skill. And my job is to actually help you get that practical skill. And in the process, you help your child. Because remember, I'm not working with your child directly, although I do have clients with whom I work with their child directly anyway. Because children can have different issues, and sometimes parents find it easier for me to deal with them than for them to deal with it themselves. And there could be different reasons for it. Okay, so that actually talks about what I've covered so far. And now I want to talk about what I'm going to do today. So let me just go back to my screen. So what I want to do today is go a lot more detail into the connection part of the parenting, which in a sense is this area. If you look at even the connection journey, this is what I mean by it. Now, for parents with whom I work, what I tend to do is I tend to kind of give them notes and handouts and worksheets in order to work out their issues, so that the journey that they're going through, it becomes easier for them to implement in their life. That is important, because sometimes people understand what you're talking about, but they don't know how to put it into action. So when I work directly with them, that is what I tend to do. There are lots of parents who will ask, is this actually for me? And the answer to that is that it is for you. This type of sessions are for you if you have a child who's got challenging behavior, or if you've got a teenager who is going through this roller coaster journey and you do not know how to actually help them, or if you've got a teenager or a child who's got a diagnosed condition, because there are times when your children can have diagnosed conditions and it is holding them back in terms of how they can progress in this world. So a simple example of this would be, if your child has got, let's say, ADHD, or a high functioning ADHD, or they've got high functioning autism, then the problem is, because they've got a diagnosed condition and the condition works in particular ways, it's holding them back. So if you've got a child like that, then again, what I'm doing is going to help you out. So that says a lot about the kind of power that this material has actually got for you. And one last point I was going to make about this, or about today, is that it's, we will run for 90 minutes. 70 minutes is my presentation, and 20 minutes is for Q&A, question and answer. So if you've got any questions, then you will have opportunity to ask me those questions. Now, I'll say a little bit about myself, so you've got some idea about what I've done in the past, and then we will go into the actual session that I've got today. So a little bit about myself. My name is Nalin Murjaria, and I've mentioned before, I'm basically a psychologist based in UK, and I work as a parenting coach. I started working as a parenting coach a long, long time ago, when a group of foster carers actually came to me and they said, Nalin, can you please devise a course for us where we are taking on children who come from difficult backgrounds? So you remember, you probably know that foster carers take in children into their own families. And children come from different backgrounds. So, for example, they might take a child who comes from a family who is got mental health problems, or they might have drug addiction problems, or they are a parent who can't look after children. So basically, this child has grown up in an environment where they may not have all the skills to function in a family. So I devised a course for them, and this was a very, very short course called Get a New Child by Saturday. Yeah, so the idea was that the foster carers will be able to use the skills we talk about and settle this new child and help them with their attitude, with their behavior, with their own character building, things like that. Now, this course was a brilliant success. And as a result, they asked me to devise another course like that, but this time for teenagers. So again, I devised a course for the teenagers. And basically, the objective was that a lot of teenagers are mouthy, they're moody, they don't worry about respect or anything. So the idea basically was the teenagers will settle in their families and learn to become respectful, learn to manage themselves, learn to do things for themselves so that they get out of this kind of, being a cool teenager who insults everybody. Now, that again is a course that became very, very successful. So they asked me to do a third course. And the third course was to do with how you create values in children so that they actually interact with the family and the family actually works in a very good kind of happy way. So I devised a course called 21 Days to Get a Happy Family. And the last course they asked me to devise was a course on study skills. Basically, they say that it's nice to have children in our family, but we also want them to do well at education. So I devised a course which was called How to Get Your A Pluses, How to Get Your A Grades. And primarily that course is designed to actually help children use their right part of the brain, which is much more better at learning, much more better at remembering, much more better at doing exams and stuff. Although a lot of people still use the left part of the brain to learn, and in the process, come the day of the exam, they've forgotten what they studied. So there are loads of issues like that, which they wanted me to address. And when I was doing all of these courses, they were doing well, but they felt that they wanted just one course, which will cover all those topics. So I sat down, and for me, it was a very, very big leap, because I had to combine so many things into one course. So I devised the course that I just talked about, where we talked about the parenting journey. And what we looked at was that basically parenting is made up of three major processes. The first one is connection, which I already talked about. There is 50 years of research on it, which says the more you connect or the better you connect, and I'll talk about what better connection is today, the more your children have a chance to grow and succeed in life. The next thing is the more you're able to direct your children. In other words, you become a compass for them. You help them become independent. You help them become confident. You help them get them a voice and things like that, better decision makers. Then they can become a compass by themselves. So that is an important process, which is where the child is growing internally. And the last thing is the child has got to do well in the world. So here we talk about competence. They got to do well at school. They got to do well with their colleagues. They got to do well with their with other children and so on. And the more they're able to do it, the more successful they'll become. And the idea basically is that you want to make your children trustworthy. In other words, other people can trust them, and in the process, they'll be given more and more leadership positions. Because leadership nowadays is to do with trust. You're not going to give somebody trust if you can't rely on them. So this competence is to do with that. And basically, this is the big leap, that when parents are able to do all these three things for the children, and the children are able to do it for themselves, that is when they've become fantastic. That is when they become the top 5 or 10% of this world who are leading and really making great changes. So that's basically the background to me getting into parenting. And I already talked about this particular chart. Now, if you wanted a copy of this chart, I've already put it on the WhatsApp group. But if people want it, then if you leave a message for me today, I will put it on again so you can download it. So that way, again, you have something in front of you so you know what I've been talking about. And the last point that is worth making is that when people who attended these courses, these are the kind of things they've said. Oh, it's a great course, or it's every parent must attend. These are the kind of reviews I've had, and you can see them on the Trustpilot. So that says a little bit about me. And I'm based in London, so basically I have access to so many things which you can't get if you're not based in London. You know, London has got fantastic bookshops. London has got all sorts of things here, which are brilliant resources for parents to actually access. So now I want to start talking about what today's session is going to be all about, which is about connection. I've also got a YouTube channel where I've answered a lot of questions, like if children don't listen to you, what can you do? Things like that. If you've got a teenager who is appearing to be lazy, what can you do? Things like that. I've already put on there. Then let's move on to today's session. So today's session basically is about connection. And I'll do a quick summary of it before we move on. I mean, basically, it's a connection masterclass. And the idea is I want to show you the magic of connection. What can connection really do for you? In a nutshell, in a summary, this is what the connection does for you. The first thing is it can be magical. In other words, it can help you easily transform your children. And I'll go into detail. So I'm just initially just doing the summary. The other thing is, it helps your children become confident. So in other words, it fills the cup. The next issue really is that if you function well as a parent, then you need to manage the dynamics of the connection, because sometimes connection can drop. It's like a phone. If your phone connection drops, you're not communicating anymore. Things that happen throughout the day where the connection with your child actually drops. And I'll talk about it in detail. So how do you reconnect? How do you get it back on track? And then we want to look at application of connections. In other words, how do you transform challenging behavior? What are the different types of challenging behavior? How do you help children overcome their poor habits and turn them into good habits? Develop a responsible child, support your child to mature, support your child to become emotionally intelligent. And the last thing is, how do you help them overcome their anxieties? And we're talking about anxieties to a level where it sometimes has become a disruptive element. And I'll go into a detail of how that can actually happen and what do you do about it. So that's basically the summary. So let me start by talking about the magic of connection. What exactly is it? And the easiest way to explain that is that when connection works, it actually works like magic. So let me tell you a story. And this is a story I've used before as well. So, you know, sometimes you might come across this story. The story is very, very simple. What happened was there was a dad. His name is Martin. He came home one day. And what happened is when he entered his house and when he entered his bedroom, he saw his 7-year-old daughter. And what she was doing was she was sitting on their bed and she was painting the bed with dark colors. Yeah, so she was using her color palette and just putting dark paint on it. Now, normally when parents see behavior like that, they'll just react and say, well, Sandy, what are you doing? Yeah, stop damaging that bed sheet. You know, they'll say things like that. But this dad was different because he attended one of our courses. So basically, instead of shouting at Sandy, he said to her, Sandy, that looks interesting. In other words, he became curious. And this is one way of engaging with a child who's got challenging behavior. In this case, the challenging behavior is destruction of property. So he said to her, oh, that looks interesting. And Sandy, on hearing this, said, Dad, I want to help Mom. I'm painting this bed sheet with dark colors because I find that every 3 days, Mom takes these bed sheets off. She washes them. She has trouble with washing them. And then she puts them back again. And because they are light colored bed sheets, if I color it dark, then she won't have to wash it every 3 days because they won't look bad. So she was actually helping her mom out by trying to destroy this property. She didn't in her head think she was destroying it, but in her heart, she realized, I want to help my mom because she's struggling. So on hearing this, the dad was a bit surprised. because he realized the daughter is actually trying to be helpful, although in the process she is damaging the bed sheets. Okay, so on hearing this, he says, "Oh, Sandy, that's wonderful. Let's ask mom how we can help her." So in other words, what he did was he engaged her, and then he tried to help her get connected with getting educated. In other words, engage and educate. Yeah, am I making sense? So basically, they had a family meeting where it became clear. So they said to mom, "Oh, Sandy was painting our bed sheet dark color because she wants to help you." And the mom said, "Yeah, I do struggle a bit. But instead of coloring it, why don't we just buy some dark bed sheets so it'll make our family life easier?" So in the process, Sandy actually learned a lesson that instead of damaging a property, it's a good idea to actually have a discussion and participate in it so that you can actually help your mom without being problematic to anybody. So this is how you actually help your children with challenging behavior. Children are not born with ready-made skills to be functional. They slowly learn how to become functional. And parents can teach, provided they actually use the techniques that I'm talking about. If you become angry, you're not going to teach. You're just going to shut the child down. So that is the power and that is the magic of connection. That when you are able to use it, what you do is you are able to engage with your child. You're going to get the best from your child because the child is going to respond. Because children are natural. They're not going to lie. They're just going to talk to you. And the idea is it then gives you the opportunity, or sometimes we call the gate, to educate them. So connect and educate is a good way of transforming challenging behavior. Now, I'm going to go a little bit more into detail on transforming challenging behavior, but that's basically the magic of connection. Now, before I go, I want to just share a little bit of research in this area as well. And what researchers have found is that when you engage with children in this way, what happens is that, the very fact that you're communicating in a way which is helpful to the child, it actually releases a lot of substances in the brain, which actually makes them more intelligent to learn. So basically, the brain chemistry actually changes. And this is, I think, a very good finding, that when you are, in a sense, helpful to your children in this way, you are actually educating them at the same time. And the child's brain becomes a learning brain. It's very, very important. So that's a good message to take away from this, that not only is it good in everyday life, but there is good research that has actually been done on it. Now, if you wanted more details, I can give you more details on what substances get released in the child's brain, which actually makes them more capable of learning. But obviously, we want our children to be learning as much as they can do, because that's the best time for them to learn. So that, in a sense, is a little bit of detail I wanted to share. Yeah. So one thing is that, the brain chemistry changes. And the other thing is that the brain actually, when the child becomes 12, the brain becomes hugely processing. In other words, the child's brain actually becomes 3 times faster. Sorry, not 3 times faster, 3,000 times faster. So in other words, what you do, what he did with Sandy at 7, if he did it when she was 12, she would be able to process that hugely better. And she can mature a lot more faster. She can even work things out by herself. So, depending on the age of the child, you can use tools which are even more effective than just what I talked about. So the important thing is, if you want to connect with your child, it is better to be age-linked as well. In other words, you're going to use the child's brain much more better than how you're probably doing it now. That actually tells you a little bit about the background research. There are about, I think, 70 books on this, by the way. And what I've just given to you in 5 minutes is just a summary of those 70 books. Let's go to the next area. Now let's go to the next bit of connection. The next bit of connection is a little bit of research that was done by, I think he's an Australian psychologist. What he talked about is that when children feel happy inside them, and he called it the language of love. I don't know if you've heard this before. It's called the language of love. So when children feel loved, they actually are able to learn better, able to function better, able to interact better, etc., etc. So in technical terms, we say that when you feel loved, your cup is full. So when you connect with your child, every time you connect with your child, if you connect with them so that their cup is full, they feel confident and so on and so forth. Later on, I'm going to talk about how the confidence actually goes down and how you bring it up. So at the moment, I'm just talking about the concept. The children, in their heart, they need the cup to be full. If the cup is not full, so for example, if a child has got pain, the cup is not full. So for example, if a child is hurt, the cup is not full. But they can quickly recover. Sometimes they recover just by the parent being around. So there are loads of things like that which fills up the cup. So when the cup is full, the child learns best. When the cup is not full, then the child actually asks for help from parents. And they will do it in different ways. Some children will cry a lot. Some children will have a tantrum. There are different ways in which children will express themselves. The idea basically is we engage and help them overcome that. That's the solution. Now, another way of looking at this, so this is another psychologist, an American one. So the first one I talked about, who talked about the cup being full, he said, using Zen type of technology, Zen cup is full. While the Americans think in terms of the glass being empty and the glass being full. So when the child feels loved, they think of life as something that they want to enjoy, and their cup is full or their glass is full. These are just different concepts saying the same thing. So if you come across books where you talk about that, then what is important is you just kind of interpret it in that way, that, a child feels confident, and when the child feels confident, they can function well. So that's what connection really does for the child. From your point of view, so let's just look at your turn. How many of you agree that to keep the cup full, to keep the child's confidence up, is very, very important? How many of you feel that? Just give me your answer. Let me just stop sharing here. How many of you feel that it's very important to keep the child confident, to keep the child functioning well? Right? How many of you feel that is important? There are loads of people says yes, yes, yes. And that is the reason why we need to learn how the cup becomes empty. In other words, how they lose their confidence and how we can revive that confidence. Very, very important. If you can do that on a daily basis, you will find your children will go through life as not just happy, but as people who are very successful and people who can do things for themselves independent. So let's go a little bit more deep into this area of what empties the child out. So let me just share the screen again. So what we want to talk about is, we already talked about, the tower of connection, that this is the place where the parent is shoulder to shoulder with the child, the parent is well bonded with the child feels secure, love, and so on and so forth. But what happens on a daily basis is that even if you start out with a good connection, throughout the day, a number of things happen which breaks the tower of connection. The breakage that happens is what we call natural disconnection. In other words, when you sleep, when you go to school, straight away, you're not connected any longer to your parent. And you will find that a lot of children have got sleep difficulties. A lot of children, they can't sleep because they think if they go to sleep, they will lose the fun of life. So they don't go to sleep, they stay away. And that, in fact, is not a good idea. If you connect well with your child before they sleep, then they will sleep well. So sleep is a major issue in a lot of parenting situations. Another thing that breaks the connection is a child does something. So say, for example, a child breaks a toy and you start shouting at them. They feel upset and they get disconnected with you. Now, when they get disconnected with you, they are by themselves. If they are not mature, then what will happen is they'll feel the frustration, they'll feel anger, they'll feel they're not in tune with you. Yeah, it should say out of tune. My spelling is wrong there. They might become impatient with you. They feel ashamed that they've done something that shouldn't have. So, for example, if they break a toy, sometimes they don't know why they've broken a toy, but parents can shame them. Oh, this was so expensive. They'll feel the tension and so on. So when there is disconnection, it happens naturally. And sometimes the disconnection happens simply because a child has got an internal need. So in other words, they go to a store and they like a toy. Oh, I want that toy. And then they will have a tantrum. Am I making sense? So there are different ways in which a child will get disconnected with you. And as soon as they get disconnected, the tower breaks. And this is now between you and the child. And if you don't know how to make a bridge of this again, then to reconnect with the child is difficult. Sometimes I come across parents who are here and they are drinking, they don't have good parenting skills and so on, and they don't know how to reconnect with the child. And in the process, what happens is you see this child acting out. Not only will they act out at home, they'll act out at school, they will become a bully, they'll become all sorts of things. So having the skill for a parent to be able to reconnect is really, really critical, very important. When a child is like that, we say that this parent is kind of creating a situation where they've isolated the child. Sometimes, because the child acts up, the parent will scold them, there'll be tension between the child and the parent, the child will act out. There are different ways in which a child will act out, and I'll talk about it in a bit more detail in a minute. How do children act out? They feel ashamed, they feel impatient, they feel angry, etc., etc. They are isolated, but the parent doesn't know how to reconnect. And when the parent doesn't know how to reconnect, then this is the way in which the child will actually act out. Some children, normally tends to be the firstborn child, will act out by what we call flight. So in other words, what they will do is they will spend a lot of time, they'll just try and avoid you as a parent. They will go into social media, they'll watch too much TV, they will see too many play too many TV games, they'll start engaging with friends and so on. If they're slightly older, then they will start smoking, they'll start doing drugs. And this is what we call a flight reaction. In other words, the child is running away from the parent. So when the child is in the tower of isolation, this is what happens to them. Another way, and this is normally the second child, if you have two children, the first child will be more flight, the second child will be more fight. So they will fight back to you. And what they will do is they'll talk back, they'll tease the younger children, they'll bully other children, and generally they'll be difficult to handle. So this, in a sense, is the flight reaction. So if you're getting these kind of reactions from your children, then you as a parent need to learn how to connect with your child effectively. And I'll go into a lot more detail on that, but at this point, this is the point that is worth making. And then there is a small proportion of children who actually go into what I call a freeze reaction. So what happens with them is they'll withdraw into their own room, they will start feeling worried, their grades in the school will start going down, they'll lose concentration. Some children also start feeling guilty. They think, oh, it's because of me that my parent is behaving this way. So again, it actually harms them. And unfortunately, this is the stuff, when children go into freeze reaction, that is what causes mental illnesses. And there are different types of mental illnesses. So you have anxiety, you have depression, you have psychosis, all these kind of conditions. Some children also suffer eating disorders and so on and so forth. It's because they're in this freeze reaction. And the idea really is, we want the children to be in the face reaction. In other words, they learn how to handle the issues that are in front of them. So for example, if they wanted that toy and they went into, acted out, had a tantrum, you need to help the child learn to understand that there are times in life when you can't get a toy. Help them become responsible. That is what we call a face reaction. And I'll go into more detail on how you create that with a child. But at the moment, we're just talking about when connection fails. When connection fails, this is what happens. Now, another reason why connection can fail is that we send our children to places like schools. So a school is when you as a parent are no longer present. And when you are not present, they are in an environment where they feel incompetent. They feel they are on their own. They've got no one to help them. They feel overwhelmed. They feel, oh, there's too much going on. So when they feel like that, and on top, they've got to follow school rules. They've got to wear a uniform. Even if it's uncomfortable, they've got to still wear it. I've got children who, in the past, they don't like their uniform. So they get into trouble with it. You got to control yourself, sit in one place for 40 minutes so the teachers can teach you. You got to behave well. You got to sit down and learn. You got to do exams. You get feedback sometimes, which tells you, you're a good student, etc. So in a school context, it makes the child powerless. So this is where they start losing connection. And when this happens, what happens is when the child gets home, they start acting up. So this is where they will start showing anger and stuff like that. So again, it's the job of the parents to actually help out. And the question is, if a child feels isolated or powerless, then these are the kind of things that the parent has got to do in order to reestablish connection with the child. So they've got to start listening to the child. They've got to start setting healthy limits. I'll go into detail on this in a minute. They've got to spend special time with them. These are some of the skills that parents bring in order to help the child get back on this tower of connection. And in the end, if they do that effectively, then the child gets reconnected. Now, this is a drama that happens on a daily basis. In every family, it happens. And what I find is that a lot of parents do not know how to do these things effectively. And that's one of the reasons why the child continues with behavior, which is difficult. So they'll continue with their anger, they'll continue. So if you can build that bridge, if you know how to reconnect, and it's a parenting skill in its own right, the more you can do it, the more you can do things like this. For example, if you're going to do play as an activity with a child, there are 4 types of play that you can potentially do, and they will totally connect you with the child. If they've got any bad behavior, it will disappear. If you can do listening, again, that's one of the things that actually helps children a lot. And again, that makes the bad behavior disappear. It's like, for example, with Sandy. If the parent had not listened, then the relationship with Sandy would have broken down. And when you set healthy limits, you set healthy limits which are based on good development. And I'll go into it in a lot more detail. There is another type of play which is called special time, which if you do with your child, again, children learn a lot. I'll give you an example of what happened was that there is a company which makes toys. So it made a toy with 22 functions inside. So it will do different things. You can push it to give a horn. You can push it to make a squeaky noise. You can do all of those things. So what they did was they did an experiment with that toy. With the first group, the person came in and said to the group of children, this toy can squeak. So he showed them how the toy squeaks. You can, gave everybody a toy. Yeah. So children took that toy, did squeaking 1 or 2 times, they got bored, and they left the toy. With the second group of children, they say to the children, this is your special time to work out what this toy does. And what they found was, because the children had special time, they learned all the 12 functions of the toy, and they even worked out additional functions that the designers had even not thought of. Yeah, interesting, isn't it? That when you give children special type of environment, they actually become very, very good learners. So think about group 1 and group 2. That group 2, because they were given a particular type of instructions, just became fantastic. They managed to use their intelligence to the maximum amount. So I'm just giving you examples. And by the way, if you want to learn things like this, the technique is called NG play, ANGI, Chinese word, NG play. When you use NG play techniques, basically, children become fantastic at learning. So this gives you an example of how to reconnect with your children. Now, the question basically I have for you is this the sort of thing that you would like to learn for your children? Just give me some answers in your chat box. So some people are saying, surely. So far, we've talked about the magic of connection, and we've talked about how connection works, how it breaks, and how you can reconnect. If you can do these three things, then basically your relationship with your children will be fantastic. Now let's go to the next topic. And this is a topic we've already discussed a little bit. So this is how you apply connection. In other words, how do you use connection with a child? And the best place, or one of the best places people need to be able to connect is when your children have got challenging behavior. So I'll give you examples, although some people have already mentioned some of these examples here. When I talk to parents, these are the examples of challenging behavior they give me. So for example, children love to eat junk food. Children answer back a lot. They don't like doing the homework. They do comparison. Oh, you are much more nicer to my sister than you are to me. They make demands which appear wrong, like they want to buy a toy, which you know is not going to be that beneficial to them, or you can't afford it. They want to play too much on their TV or games. They've got exam phobia. When exams come, they start becoming sick physically sometimes. They've got time management issues. They never get anything done on time. They're always rushing. They do not have respect for either people or for other people's property or for age. They just talk in a very rude manner. There is laziness. They don't want to help out with anything to do with the house. They don't like chores. In fact, with the kind of techniques that we're going to be talking about, I think next time on the next session, things like laziness and so on, I want to address. There is lack of self-discipline. Today, I'm going to talk about self-discipline as well, and lack of confidence. Lack of confidence sometimes emerges because they don't have a good value base to actually work with. So these are some of the problems that parents actually mention. Can you, in your chat box, list some of the problems you come across? In your chat box, put down some of the problems you come across, and then we'll talk about how to solve these problems using connection. So I'll stop sharing. Let me look at the chat box. Okay, so basically it's a replication of what I already had on the list there. And we just share the screen. So basically, so far, what I've talked about is that when you have a problem like this, then the best way to work with that problem is to engage with the child and develop and educate. Let's say, for sake of argument, your child has a meltdown. Your child has a meltdown. So you go to a shop and the child wants to buy a toy, or alternatively, your teenager wants to buy a dress, which you feel is not right for them. Now, at that point, what happens is they have a meltdown. And the problem with a meltdown is they're doing it in a public place. So if they're doing it in a public place, for the parents, it's very, very embarrassing. Behavior in a public place, for example, if a child is running around, when you go to, let's say, a religious place where everybody's kind of praying and suddenly your child is running around, that is also embarrassing for you. So what happens is that for a lot of parents, when they find that this is embarrassing, they engage with the child by telling them off. Instead, you need to engage by acknowledging what they're doing. So for example, if they're running around, or if the child is crying and having a meltdown, you can engage with them and say, I understand you wanted to buy the toy. I understand that. And it's difficult for you when I have to say no. So can you see, straight away, instead of telling the child off, you actually go on their side. So that's the best way to engage. Or if, say, for example, a child wants junk food, you can easily say that I understand you love the taste of this food. And it does taste good. The problem I have with it is that as a family, we love or we should be eating healthy food. I know it's difficult for you. So now you want to develop them to eat healthy food. Am I making sense? Or if they haven't got the toy, when you engage with them, you can say, yeah, I understand you wanted to buy it, but I do have to say no. And there are times in life when other people are going to say no to you. So if you need to cry, it's okay, that's fine. I will help you while you are crying, I'll hold you, but that is part of life. So you educate them on what is realistic. Am I making sense? When you do that, you will find after a little while, the child will just stop crying. Because children have got a natural mechanism to really recover reasonably fast. Adults find it difficult to recover, but children can recover very fast. So the idea is you engage. Do not fight with your children. The idea is never ever to fight. Be on their side, and then you develop and educate. Very, very important. So you can educate them on any one of these areas. Doesn't matter which one. So for example, let's say you might have an issue of time management. That your child doesn't do homework on time. They're doing it at the last minute. So you can say to them, I understand that you have difficulty concentrating on education or concentrating on homework. Even when I was a child, I used to have it. What I can do, so now you educate, that when you feel like that, I know it's hard to get started, but let's get started. And you can say, let's take 5 minutes to just take a deep breath so that you overcome your frustration, and then we get started. So again, your job is to educate. Your job is to help the child become used to the idea that life is not always easy. And to be able to handle life, even when then it's not easy, that is being a lot more mature child. So that's the whole idea. I would say the more you learn these skills, the better you become at it. So learn to engage and educate in a very systematic way, and you will find your children will actually mature, or children will actually become responsible much more quickly. And sometimes you can even educate. So for example, if a child wants an expensive toy, you can say, all right, I understand you want this toy. At this moment, we can't afford it. But let's see if we can buy it in 6 months' time. So how shall we start saving for it? So you can help your child become a lot more responsible. But you do not want to beat up your child. You do not want to argue with your child. You do not want to tell them off. You don't want to say, oh, Nathan next door behaves well. Why can't you behave like that? You don't want to shame your child. Am I making sense? So this is the type of method that you can actually use to learn to work with your children by engaging and developing. Engage and develop, engage and develop. This is what you have to be doing all the time, and you will find you will get fantastic results with your child. And you will even be surprised. Your children will also start learning how to do that even when they've got other scenarios. So for example, some other child is crying, they will actually say to the child, I know this is difficult. Sometimes I just cry for 5 minutes and then I'm okay. So you will find your children become better. The additional points that are worth making is that when you are talking to your children or when you are engaging them, you've got to take into account their age, their actual behavior, and the condition of the child. So in other words, for example, if your child has got behavior which is risky, for example, they're hitting someone and so on, you ought to actually stop them. Or if your child has got a condition, like, for example, autism or something like that, then sometimes people with autism find it difficult to really understand other people's feelings. So you might actually need to learn a different strategy of dealing with it. And this is the kind of stuff that I actually work with parents on, in terms of giving them a much more, or helping them develop a much more customized plan on how to work with challenging behavior. There is no parent on earth who hasn't got challenging behavior. The only thing they don't know is how to deal with different types of behavior, because sometimes they don't have the experience of life working with children, using connection and handling challenging behavior. Okay. The next topic is a bit different, because this is to do with habits. That there is challenging behavior and then there is poor habits. The difference between them is that challenging behavior normally emerges because a child is trying to explore. So a simple example of this would be a child goes to a shop and they see a toy and they want to buy it. They didn't plan to buy it beforehand, but it's just one of their needs. It's a shiny object, they get impressed by it. While a habit is something which has got real benefits to the child. So I give you a simple example. If, say, for example, I lie about something, then it's a habit that I can develop because it protects me from certain things that happen. For example, if I've stolen, let's say 10 rupees from someone and I lie about it, or I've never seen it, or so that way I can keep that 10 rupees and I can spend it on things I like. Am I making sense? So it's beneficial like that. So poor habits are of that nature. And the type of things which make up poor habits would be things like screen time. I'm spending so much time on the screen that basically I've got no time for homework. Or alternatively, I could, I don't like doing my homework, so I just make up excuses. Oh, I've got a tummy ache or something like that. Now, the problem with poor habits is that they become long-term habits. And research on it has been done again and again and again. How do you change poor habits? So one bit of research, and this is just a summary of that research. The research basically says that when you are trying to change poor habits, you've got to deal with the urge to carry on. So for example, if I've got a poor habit, I carry on doing binge television watching. I want the urge to carry on watching because I get some pleasure out of it. People have got urge to carry on lying because it benefits them. The research actually shows that when people have got these kind of urges, the best way to actually deal with it is if you help them work out how to interrupt that urge. So I'll explain that in a minute. Let us say I'm a smoker and I've got urge to smoke. Now, the reason why I'm smoking is when I smoke, it feels good. And if somebody says to me, Nalin, you're going to become ill, I say to them, no, I'm not going to become ill because my grandfather was smoking until he was 80. Nothing happened to him. He didn't develop cancer or anything like that. So can you see the urge is there? So the urge basically persuades the person to carry on smoking. So the idea is we need to help the child break into that urge. Now, research actually shows that the way to break into that urge is to actually break into one of the belief systems. So the belief system is, my grandfather was smoking for a long time, nothing happened to him. So if for sake of argument, I receive a phone call from a friend of mine, which says, Nalin, I'm calling you from the cancer hospital. I've got stage 4 cancer, and I know we started smoking together, me and you. Today, I find I've got only 3 weeks to live. And the first person I thought of was you, because I realize I don't want you to go through the same thing that I'm going through. So can you please promise me that you will stop smoking? So as soon as I hear that information, it breaks into my urge. Because previously I was thinking smoking is safe. Now I think smoking is dangerous because my friend is dying. Am I making sense? So if your child has got habits like that, so for example, if they've got a screen time habit, or if they've got a habit to lie, or if they've got habit of not wanting to do homework and so on, we need to find ways in which we can help them overcome their urge. So here on the smoking issue, the message overcame the urge. So in the same way, we as parents need to look at our child and work out what is it that is actually going to break that urge. And that really is the technique. And the best way to do it is by using your connection to actually work out how to break into that urge. So I'll give you a simple example. Let us say my child is watching too much television, or my child is spending too much time on the screen. The urge is to carry on watching. So the way I can connect with them is by starting to say, son, I can see you enjoy your television a lot, or I can see you enjoy your screen time a lot. Tell me, what is it in there that actually gives you so much pleasure? So they can say, Dad, it helps me pass time. I never get bored. I don't have to worry about friends or anything like that. I'm just having fun on my own. I'm enjoying life. So now I've got information. Can you see the connection gave me the information? Then I can say to him that, son, I understand you enjoy your life a lot. But think about it logically. Is what you're doing interrupting your studies? Is it interrupting the time you can spend with your family, having a good time playing with them? Is it something that is stopping you from making good friends? Do you need friends in your life? Do you think you need education in order to get ahead with your life? So on and so forth. As soon as I raise these questions because of connection, it helps my child break into that urge. Because the child then begin to realize, oh, if I don't study, then I'll be sweeping streets. That is not the job that I want to do. And then the last thing is, you can say to your child, is there anything I can do for you that will help you change your habit? And this is where they can establish new habits. Now, today, we don't have a chance to actually go into how you help your child establish a new habit. But what we have a chance to do is just use connection in order to highlight what the damage that habit is doing. In other words, you break into that urge. The more you break into the urge like that, the more you will be able to change different types of difficult behavior. And in fact, one of the sessions that I want to do later on is how do you help your child break into these different types of habits so that, all these poor habits become better habits. In other words, instead of spending time on a screen, they spend time doing homework. So this is the kind of message that I want to give you. But the key important bit here is connection is very, very important. If you don't have connection with your child, if your child hates you, they won't listen to you, and you don't have a chance to correct. So that's the message that I wanted to give you about how to change habits. And the key message I want you to take away with, on this particular topic is that you need to be able to use connection to make that habit difficult. I've even worked with people who've got habits like alcohol use and drug use, and we use exactly the same technique of how to break into the urge, the urge to drink, the urge to smoke. Some people also get addicted to relationships, certain types of relationships which are actually dangerous to them, like being part of a gang. So I even work with people like that. Okay, so that in a sense shows you how you can work with replacing habits. Now remember, habits are different to challenging behavior. Challenging behavior happens just by itself because the person has got a need, while habits actually form over a period of time. And the idea with habits is that if you don't keep habits on track, a person could relapse. So for example, all the research studies on relapsing actually shows that in order to actually give up smoking, it takes 35 goes. In order to give up alcohol, it takes about 20-25 goes. So in order to break a screen habit, you might need to change it at least 10-15 times before it becomes a healthy habit. That, in a sense, is the kind of research we use in order to break through habits. So if your children have got those kind of habits, then it's useful to actually do a session on how to break through the habits and help your child out. Okay, now let's talk about how to make your child responsible. This is an important issue. And again, connection is a key tool to actually helping your child become responsible. Now, let me explain what responsibility is. One way of describing responsibility is to say you create self-discipline. So let me give you an example, right? So the type of tools that I would suggest you use, one of them is called boundary setting and the other one is called motivation directing. And I'll explain it in a bit more detail. So let's imagine you've got a child who plays with their toys and then they leave them on the floor. And they go out and play with their friends and so on. And you want your child to get into the discipline of putting their toys away as soon as they have played with them or as soon as they've finished playing with them. So one technique you can use in order to create the discipline is called boundary setting. So I'll give you an example. What you say to your child is, you know, I love it when you play with your toys. It's very nice to see. I can see you're enjoying yourself. But there is one thing that I'd really like you to do. Because you sometimes leave your toys on the floor, and it can be kind of health and safety hazard for everyone, I want you to put your toys away in a box. Now, if you don't do this, and I see toys on the ground, then what I will do is I'll pick them up and put them in this corner. If you want to reclaim the toy, then you got to do an errand for me. You got to do some sort of, cut vegetables for me, or do the laundry for me, or fold the laundry, do something like that, or wash the car if the child is a bit older. And if you don't pick up your toy within 2 days, I'll give your toy away to a charity. Now, children, first of all, I know, don't take you seriously. But after you've given away 2 of their favorite toys to a charity, they soon realize that they've got to follow the discipline. So what I'm saying to you is, do not argue with your child. Learn to set boundaries. As soon as you learn to set boundaries, the child starts becoming responsible. It's very, very important. This boundary setting is a very, very important parenting skill. So that's one way in which you can motivate your children to become self-sufficient or self-directing. Another way you can help your children to self-direct is do what I call motivational directing on the spot. So a simple example of this would be, let's imagine you come home and you see your children have had their friends over and all the toys are on the ground. Now, a normal parent would just get upset with it. What are you guys doing? Look what you've done. Instead, what you do is you do motivational directing. So this is how you do motivational directing. You gather all the children together, and you can say, guys, I can see you've had fun playing with all these toys. And I love it. I love my children enjoying themselves. What I've got to do is I need all of us to pick up all these toys before dinner time. So then you pick 2 children up and you can say, you 2, can you pick up the toys from this corner? You 2, can you pick up the toys from this corner? I will supervise you on where to put them. So let's get going. And you use your presence. You don't move away from there. It's important to be in the same room as the children doing the work. Otherwise, they will themselves disappear. So stay in that room, use your presence and soft language to actually get the cooperation. So you can say, oh, Martin, you know that toy there, just pick it up and give it to this person. Or, just be polite, right? The idea is Your presence should actually encourage children to follow your instructions. So if you do this motivation directing, you will actually find children will learn the good manners of picking up their toys after they've played with them. So that's another way in which you can use your skills, connection skills, in order to encourage children to do stuff which they normally just don't do it automatically. You just need to train your children. And sometimes you got to do this 3 or 4 times before it starts becoming a habit. So the points that I wanted to make is these are 2 basic techniques you can use. But along with this, you might also want to use what we call age-linked responsibility. In other words, you work out, or I can even give you a list of this. What are the things that, for example, toddlers can do? What are the things that children can do? What are the things that teenagers can do? And what are the sort of things that a child with a diagnosed condition can actually do? Age-linked. And what you can do is you can create a family environment in which toddlers do what they can do, children do what they're required to do. So, for example, a 7-year-old should be able to fold laundry, or a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old should be able to actually clean up the floor after they've played. A teenager should be able to do a lot more, and you can give them different types of duties. So, for example, a teenager should be able to cook a meal, because as they grow older, if they go to university, eventually they'll have to cook meals for themselves. So there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to do it at a teenage. And if you've got a child with a diagnosed condition, then of course you need to take into consideration what those different abilities are. What we tend to do is we tend to do an assessment, and based on that, we work out what would be good for the child to do. And by doing this, what you're doing is you're encouraging your children to become self-sufficient, and you're encouraging your children to be independent. And remember, there are different types of independence that a child really needs. One of them is that they should be able to look after their own, like what I call body things, brush their teeth and clean themselves and make sure they're able to have a bath by themselves and so on and so forth. Then they should be able to, in a sense, do things for the family. So, for example, there's no reason why a child cannot help you with cutting vegetables. Now, initially, you might think, oh, they might cut themselves if they're using a knife. There are problems that can easily be resolved. You can buy a knife which a child can easily use, or alternatively, you kind of make sure that they're cutting vegetables under your supervision so they don't cut themselves. So you give them health and safety instructions. But anyway, these are the kind of recommendations I'll make to you if you want to have a responsible child. But you can see that when you are doing this, you are playing a major connection role. In other words, your connection is the one that is actually encouraging your child to become more and more self-sufficient. So these are some of the handouts that, for example, the 2 techniques I talked about. One is boundary setting, and the other one is motivation direction. And the third technique, or third set of techniques, are age-linked responsibilities. And the idea basically is we want to make both boys and girls, remember, self-sufficient. And nowadays, I think it's a good idea for girls to learn a lot of skills as well. So, for example, there's no reason why girls can't learn how to, for example, change a light bulb, but they have to do it in a health and safety responsible way. And remember, I've been talking about Angie Play earlier on, right? Angie Play teaches children all those things. How to use tools, how to make things, and how you actually learn maths and English and all sorts of skills in order to make your life work well. So Angie Play is something that I'll recommend if you can do. There's another guy that I quite like. His name is Teacher Tom. I don't know if any one of you have come across him. He is a teacher and he's written 2 books, and he talks about how you can actually make children totally self-sufficient. And we're talking about little children. We're not talking about even teenagers. We're talking about children who are younger than teenagers becoming totally self-sufficient with what they need to do and how they function in life. So those are the things that I would love to kind of teach you when we get a chance. So far we've talked about loads of things. Let me go to the next topic where connection is critical. And the next topic or the next area where connection is critical is maturity. So maturity is to do with how your children are making decisions. That when they make decisions, are they taking into consideration the kind of information that actually makes those decisions commonsensical? So I'll give you a simple example. Let's imagine your son comes home one day, and this is your 15-year-old son, and the son says, "Mom, I don't want to go to school anymore." And you say, "Why is that, son?" And he says, "You know Raju next door. I was talking to him, and he told me that he left school at 15 years of age. Yeah, just like how I am now. And he actually sells stuff in the pub, local pub. He makes a good living. He's got a car. He's got a girlfriend. I think I'd like to join up with him and do what he's doing." Now, as a parent, if you hear that, you'll think, "Oh my God, this doesn't sound like a mature decision." From your point of view, how would you handle him? You know, if your child, 15-year-old, remember, it is at an age where he's able to make quite a few decisions by himself. If your child does that kind of stuff, what would you do? So let's hear what you would do in your chat box. What would you do? Connection building and advise him for better. So how would you build the connection? What would you do? Any ideas? I think I've already given you some of the ideas. Connection and breakthrough. Okay. So the idea is, so just for the benefit of others, what you need to do is, first of all, you agree with him. You agree with him, and you can say, "Well, that sounds like a good idea. But tell me, how does he buy the stuff that he sells?" So, for example, if he says to you that, he buys stuff from XYZ and he sells it, and then you can say, "Look, think about it. Is this stuff he's selling good quality? If you sell stuff like this, what do you think your customers will think of you? Will you be able to have long-term customers?" Can you see? You are agreeing with him with the intention to prove to him that what he's doing is problematic. Then you can say, "Okay, if he's selling in the pub, he hasn't got a regular place to sell. If you don't have a regular place to sell, what happens to you? People think you are not legitimate." The next thing is, if the police catch you selling there, what do you think they will do? They'll report you to the income tax people, and the income tax people will send you to court. Is that what you want? And the next thing is, think about it logically. Do you have a chance to make a career out of this long term if you carry on selling in a pub? There's no career in there. You will be exactly where you are. While if you follow a career after a qualification, then your chances are you'll go higher and higher and higher. Your salary will improve. You will have a better chance in life. You will have other opportunities to become self-sufficient, set up your own business and so on. So the idea basically is you actually help the person understand information that they're currently not taking into consideration. Am I making sense? By doing that, basically the child becomes mature. And the more you do that, the more you find that you are able to coach them. So the idea is never fight with your child. Always educate them. Always educate them. Because at the age of 15, if they did something like this behind your back, you wouldn't even know. So the idea is the more connected you are with your children, the easier it is for you to help them mature. Now, maturity is a topic where you need to do a lot more than just help the child with information sharing. You need to help them understand how to interpret information. So you help the child interpret the information legally. You help the child find the information correctly. You help the child work out the logic. So there are loads of things you're teaching your child, which adults know how to do, but children don't know how to do. So you're helping the child actually grow in the process and become a good, reasonable human being, not break the law, think about their long-term interest. This is the kind of things that mature people really do. Okay, so I think that answers that question. Now, one thing I wanted to talk to you about is issue about emotional intelligence. Has anybody come across this idea of emotional intelligence? I'll just stop it here. Let me see in the chat box. All right, so let me share the research on emotional intelligence with you. Basically, when we think about emotional intelligence is even more important than IQ, which is intelligent quotient. Because intelligent quotient just teaches you how to process information, while emotional intelligence is a technique that you can use in order to understand the world around you and take intelligent decisions. So in other words, you understand your world emotionally and make intelligent decisions. So let me share a story with you so it gives you an idea. This is a story I heard from Sadhguru, that once there was a bird that was flying happily, just flying around. And winter was coming, so it realized it needs to get out of the situation. Anyway, it forgot where it was going, so instead of going south, it started going north. And it started getting cold and cold and cold, and its wings froze. When its wings froze, it landed in a field. Now, there was a cow in the field grazing. So the cow basically pooped on the bird, and the bird started getting warm. When it started getting warm and the wings started getting enough warmth, the bird started singing. As soon as it started singing, there was a cat going by. The cat pulled out the bird and ate it. So the moral of the story basically is that this bird wasn't emotionally intelligent. The key thing is that when it started becoming warm, forgot the idea that you need to still protect yourself because you are on the ground and you can easily get attacked. So an emotionally intelligent bird would have kept quiet and shaken the poop off it, shit off it, and looked around and said, oh, is it safe to fly? And it would have flown. So the key message of this is that when you are in shit, you should stop singing, opening your mouth, and think with your brain before you do anything. Otherwise, you'll start getting eaten alive. So that is the moral of the story, that the bird lost its life because it wasn't emotionally intelligent. So that gives you an idea about emotional intelligence, that you do things by taking into consideration what is around you. And the more you think like that, the more capable you become of getting out of difficulties and getting the best out of a situation. So that's the story about emotional intelligence. Now, the key thing is, if you want to build emotional intelligence, as a parent, when you're connected with your child, you should teach them a number of skills. So one of the skills is you need to teach the child how to identify their own emotions. When they're angry, they need to be able to identify it. They need to be able to see what is the strength and the weakness of the different feelings they have. They need to learn how to listen to their own feelings. In other words, make an assessment of what is safe, what is not safe. They need to make an assessment of what is happening around them. How are the other people feeling? And how to interact with them so that you can get the best out of the situation. So that is called empathy skills. And then you teach the child problem solving. And the best type of problem solving they can learn is called win-win problem solving. In other words, you work out a solution where you win and the other person wins. And this was a term that, in fact, all the international negotiators actually learned. Originally invented by a person called Fisher and Urey, who actually negotiated the agreement between America and Vietnam. Win-win outcome. Something that both sides feel they're winning on, and as a result, they can actually stop the conflict. They can get the best out. And the last thing is that in order for your child to believe in you, you need to lead by example. In other words, you need to show emotional intelligence so that the child will have confidence in doing all of these things. Now, I know that it's a complicated thing to understand, but it is very important to develop in a child. The more emotional intelligence a child has got, the more successful they'll become. Research actually shows that if your child is emotionally intelligent, if they are working, their salary is normally 20% higher than the other people around them. If there is a leadership position going, your emotional intelligent child is more likely to get the project than anybody else. Yeah. So very, very important. This emotional intelligence, I cannot overemphasize. Okay. So that gives you an idea about emotional intelligence. And the last topic that I want to look at today is the topic of anxieties. That there are times when your child will feel anxious. And as a result, what will happen is they'll behave in ways which are destructive to them, which are not helpful to them. So I'll give you an example. So what happened was, there was a school that went to a swimming pool and they were teaching children how to swim. One child got so nervous about the water that it pooped in its pants. So when that happens, you realize what happens. The water becomes kind of filthy, or water becomes contaminated, and everybody's got to be taken out. So the teacher got so angry that it says, next time this child comes, we won't allow it to swim. We will just get them to sit on the side and blow bubbles. The parent wanted the child to learn swimming, but the child has got anxiety about swimming. So what does the parent do? So my advice to the parent was that the parent should help the child overcome the anxiety. So this is what I explained to them, that what happens with anxiety is that when you think about things, in some people, in 7% of the population, their imagery, the image in the brain is very, very active. So it becomes so worried. So for example, if I see an accident, I begin to think, oh my God, I might get involved in an accident. I better not go out of the house. So in other words, I will stop going out of the house. And as a result, I can lose my job. So the same way, a child going into water can begin to think, I will drown, so I can't swim. So what the parent has got to do is help the child learn to adjust their active mind, right? And the best way to help your child manage their active mind is go to the pool yourself, take the child with you. Go to the end, which is a shallow end, and help the child manage their body first, their breathing. Because, when you're scared, you tend to breathe much more heavily. So you learn to breathe nicely. Then you learn to function in the shallow water. Learn to swim a little bit there. Then you expose the child to a much more deeper part, and then the deeper part and deeper part, until they can swim in your presence. And then eventually they can swim by themselves. So in other words, you are training the brain by doing something rather than by talking about it. Am I making sense? So here you are using what we will call your non-verbal communication. Because up to now, we've just talked about verbal communication, how you talk to children. Here we're talking about how you use your body to help the child function better. And that is the way you can help your child deal with their anxieties. And there are loads of anxieties that children experience. For example, they experience fear of dark, they experience fear of strangers, they experience fear of animals and stuff. And the idea basically is we can help our children function better in their environment without anxieties if we are using connection in order to help them work that through. So from my point, or from my side, I've done all the topics that are useful to do when it comes to helping your child or helping you use connection to actually empower your child to do the best in the circumstances they're in. Now, one question I have for you is, if I were to ask you today, what job do you think your child will do when they grow up? Research actually shows that whatever answer you gave me, 90% of you are going to be wrong. The reason for that is that the world is moving so fast that whatever job that we're thinking of our child will do will have disappeared by the time our children have grown up, and new jobs have taken effect because the technology is moving fast, the economy is moving fast, and the jobs that our children are going to do have not even been invented yet. So the idea is, whenever we are doing parenting, we should be preparing our children for the future where the talent they have is what is going to be giving them the job rather than preparing them for a job. So that's an important point. So we should be preparing our children in the way where we are enabling them to become the best that they can be. Now, in order to do that, as a result of the session today, you've got three choices. One choice is you can say, okay, I don't need to do this. My children are functioning very well because the school can do it for them. Alternatively, you take all the ideas we've talked about today and help your children just do it yourself. In other words, you go to YouTube, you go to all the internet and find stuff. Or the third thing is, if you feel you need help or you could do with some support, then you can give me a call and I can book a time with you and we can work out how I can help you with your parenting. But remember, today we've just looked at how you connect and empower your children. I've got a question. Did you find today's stuff useful? Just put your answer in your chat box. Did you find it useful? How to use connection in order to enable your child? Yes, definitely. Yeah, a lot of people are saying definitely, yeah. Okay, so this was useful. Is there anyone who wants to talk to me so that we can devise what I'll call a strategy plan on how to develop your child?